isn't so bad. Canceling all of the plans that we had. Sacrifices must be made to make this containable. I've got PlayStation 4 and Nintendo. I've got Hulu and Netflix galore. Doesn't quite measure up in the end though. Playing games, streaming shows, I want more. I want to be where the people are. I want to see their faces, and I don't just mean through, what's the app? Zoom. That's what it is. That's it. Video calls don't incentivize nearly enough to make me put clothes on. Why should I put on pants if I can't leave my room? Wish this whole thing would just subside so we can finally go back outside. Keep your hands clean and quarantine will be done soon. What would I give if we could live free from this virus? What would we pay to spend our days out with our friends? Talking online, biding our time, while cabin fever builds inside us. Don't go postal before social distancing ends. I'm ready to see the outside again. Open the door up and feel the sunshine. Lack of vitamin D isn't good for your bones. Sure, we have our phones, tablets, TVs, and lack of pollution is saving the bees. But just keep your hands clean. And quarantine will be done soon.
And the people stayed home.
And the people stayed home.
The people stayed home.
And 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 read books.
And listened.
And rested.
And exercised.
And made art.
And played games.
And learned new ways of being.
And were still.
And listened more deeply.
And listened
more deeply.
And listened more deeply.
Some meditated.
Some prayed.
Some danced.
Some met their shadows.
And the people began to think differently.
Differently.
And people began to think differently.
And the people healed.
And in the absence of people living in ignorant,
dangerous,
mindless, and heartless ways,
the earth began to heal.
And when the danger passed and the people joined together again,
they grieved their losses
and made new choices
and dreamed new images
and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully.
As they had been healed.
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 stop breathing, till your heart starts kick drum beating. When it's hard times, when it's some long days, the enemy is right in your face, your back's against the ropes, you're feeling all alone. Keep fighting the good fight, keep letting your light shine, and I'm never gonna leave you, always gonna see this through to the other side. Keep fighting the good, fighting the good, fighting the good fight, good fight. Till you stop bleeding, till you stop breathing, till your heart starts kick drum beating. When it's hard times, when some long days, the enemy is right in your face, when your back's against the ropes, you're feeling all alone. Keep fighting the good fight, keep letting your light shine. I'm never gonna leave you, always gonna see this through to the other side. Keep fighting the good, fighting the good, fighting the good fight, good fight. Keep on singing, keep on dancing, joy will be your banner, love can be our anthem, 'cause we may never know what tomorrow holds, but we can know love is holding on tomorrow. Keep fighting the good fight, keep letting this light shine. I'm never gonna leave you, always gonna see this through to the other side. Keep fighting the good, fighting the good, fighting the good fight. Keep fighting the good fight. Keep letting this light shine. I'm never gonna leave you, always gonna see this through to the other side. Keep fighting the good, fighting the good, fighting the good fight, good fight. Grace and peace.
Hi everyone, this is Maria. This week I've chosen a piece by Elizabeth Gilbert, who's an author. Most people know her from Eat, Pray, Love. And she's a fantastically fluid person, and I can't get enough of her. She's just magnetic. So she tells this story, there's a video online, she tells this story about this woman she married, Rhea, who was an ex-addict, an ex-felon, and who had gotten out of prison and, got her life back together and was living her life fully sober. And they got married, and Rhea was then invited to speak at the jail that she had been in, Rikers prison, which I guess is a really awful women's prison in New York. She was asked to speak because they were going to open a library, and when Rhea was in prison there was no library. And what the audience didn't know is that Rhea had found out she had terminal cancer a week before she was supposed to speak at this event. Only Elizabeth, her wife, and a few other people knew, like her close group of friends or family. And so when Rhea got to the event to speak, she had this whole speech written out for the dignitaries and, the official people there. But they had some people who were in prison there, and they had them sit on a very specific bench and, in shackles and all of this. And Rhea gets up and, as Elizabeth tells it, has her speech and crumples it up and throws it over her shoulder and says, I don't want to speak. I was going to speak to them, the dignitaries, but I want to speak to you, pointing to the people who were in chains. And she says, you don't live here. I don't know where you're going. You might go somewhere different next. You probably come from somewhere different, and you don't live there either. Where you live is here. And she points to her head, her mind. And she says, and this isn't who you are. Who you are is in your heart. And she points to her heart. And I just think that that's such an interesting concept for now. And yeah, I just want to leave you with that.
Happy Sunday, greater purpose. You are welcomed, you are affirmed, and you are loved at this table that is set for kindred shakers of empire, the fiercely hospitable and devout arbiters of goodwill toward humanity. A couple of announcements before we move into the sermon. One, in the description of this video is a link for our Zoom Room Fellowship Hour. You're going to see that at the beginning of the video and at the end. So join us after the service and we're going to enjoy some time together, hopefully over drinks. We are not collecting tithes. We haven't been during this entire crisis, but we do ask that if you have a need, please post it in the comment section of this video along with your Venmo ID describing what your situation is. And church, if you feel led, if you can, please help each other if you have abundance to share during this time of crisis. So many people need assistance. Also, get you a grain product, get you a glass of wine, set it to the side, because at the end of the service, we have a very special guest that is going to lead us in communion, and also pour you out an adult beverage. Mine is go-to is bourbon on a weekly basis. Get you some, enjoy it. This is not a dry church. And also please do us a favor and start a Facebook watch party of this video right now. Click that watch party button so your friends can enjoy a message and enjoy seeing a church that for once is embracing science and standing on the right side of history. I think a lot of people need to see a social justice oriented church. And finally, it's a good idea to mention, we talk about this a lot, these are heavy subjects. If you need to step away at any point, if some of this stuff is just triggering you because of your past experiences, that's okay. We understand. We don't want you to suffer. Please step away if you feel like you need to. Now this week, we're going to dive right in. We have been going through the Torah because we're doing a deep dive into the Hebrew Bible, and we are done with the Torah. We are moving away with those first 5 books of the Bible, and we're moving on to our discussion concerning the books of the prophets. Now these books are divided into 2 sections, former prophets and latter prophets. All right, now former prophets include books like Joshua, Judges, 1st and 2nd Samuel, and 1st and 2nd Kings. And the work of the former prophets, which we're going to look at first, they read as a historical narrative injected with theological elements. And we're going to go through the books of the former prophets in the beginning of this section of our walkthrough for the next few weeks, because we have to comprehend the time period and culture depicted in the works of the former prophets in order to understand the latter prophets. Now, the following study after the former prophets will include the books of the latter prophets, and these works are named after the prophets whose stories make up that book's content. All right, so they're named after those prophets, but we need to understand the socio-political reality in which the latter prophets were written in, because these latter prophets made mystical predictions during the events listed in the works of the former prophets. Hopefully that made sense. Click like if you're still with me. All right. Had a couple flubs so far. I think I need... Oh yeah, that helps. It may not help you, but it helps me. These former works were likely a composition of oral traditions and previously archived records, and when the editors for the scriptures of the works of the prophets compiled these texts and these legends, scholars note that there are common themes within them that are similar to the Deuteronomic sources. Remember, there are 4 sources mentioned that were used to construct the Torah, and each source had different themes. We have the Yahwist, the J source, and the Elohist, the E source, and they were authored by people that valued free-spirited forms of religion. All right, these folks would have fit right in a lot of Santa Cruz circles. And then you had the priestly source, and this was written by people that were concerned with structure and tradition and the symbolism behind their rituals. But then you have the Deuteronomic source, and the Deuteronomic sources is mostly concerned with humanitarian issues. Some of the most powerful messages in our biblical law study of Leviticus and Deuteronomy were from D-source materials. Hashtag this is what Deuteronomy looks like, all right? And by the time we get to the work of the prophets, many scholars, not all, but many conclude that this is where the J and the E and the P sources conclude. But the D source appears to finish those narratives, and the D source both redacts and bridges the end of the Torah to the section of the Hebrew Bible concerning the writing of the prophets. Now, the most prevalent thought throughout the Deuteronomic source in the books of the prophets is that Israel's claim and ability to keep their land is directly tied to their obedience and disobedience to their God Yahweh. And in this way, these Deuteronomic books can be classified as a historiosophy. Now, a historiosophy, according to Professor Hayes at Yale, is a method of recording history that does not just detail certain events, but it seeks to understand the cause and the effects of those events. So the works of the prophets do not seek to describe what happened. It's more concerned with ascertaining why those events unfolded the way that they did in history. And it does so narratively through this literary pattern of reward and punishment for following God's laws and God's ordinances throughout the books of the former and latter prophets. Other interesting facts here. The works of the prophets declare that Jerusalem is God's chosen city. All right, the Bible doesn't always agree with that, but in the Deuteronomic sources, it says Jerusalem is God's chosen city. And these are also the first books to assume a monarchy with David as the ideal and elected king. Now remember, this is huge. We talked about this a couple weeks back. Up until this point, the other sources had no interest in having a king. In fact, they opposed monarchies theologically. Having a king for many earlier sects of Israelites was breaking, in their minds, with their covenant with their God. The older I get, the more clearly I can see that this is one of the wisest notions throughout history. Now, why do I say that? Because the older I get, the more I realize that people at their core are flawed. All of us, myself included. And it seems like the higher people ascend politically, the more corrupt they inevitably become. And we see this in our own government as well. Now, of course, there are exceptions, right? Jimmy Carter, Ocasio-Cortez, Representatives Tlaib, Omar and Presley, and of course, Bernie Sanders. But for the most part, macro view here, I have concluded that many politicians are not the best role model in some way, shape, or form, and I think most of you would probably agree. Matter of fact, click that like button if you agree. And that is likely because humanity is a deeply flawed and self-destructive species. All right, the Bible calls this notion sin. Sociologists, psychologists, anthropologists, they call this the human condition, right? Because of this, it is clear that our own self-destructive nature and selfish interest is why the refusal to adopt a king was the smartest thing that any kingdom has ever done. It is the wisest proclamation in the ancient Israel text, in my humble opinion. And even the Deuteronomic source acknowledges that a ruling class is a shitty concept. 1 Samuel 8:10-22 says this. It says, "So Samuel reported all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. And he said, 'These will be the ways of the king that you want to reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50, and some to plow his grounds and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his courts. He will take 1/10 of your grain and of your vineyards and give it to his officers and his servants. He will take the best of your cattle and your donkeys and put them to his works. He will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you shall be his slave. And in that day you will cry out because of your king that you demanded, who you had to have for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you on that day. But the people refused to listen to the wisdom of Samuel, and they said, no, but we are determined to have a king over us, so that we also may be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out before us and kill our enemies in battle. When Samuel heard all the words of the people, he repeated them in the ears of the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, listen to their voice and set a king over them. Samuel is literally like, look, you really, really, really don't want this at all. Yes, it might fortify your military, and yes, you may not have to go to battle yourself, and in some ways things can be easier, but overall, if we assess the situation, this is a really stupid-ass idea. This is the worst idea of ideas throughout history. This is terrible. And my question is this. Let's say the Republicans are right. I don't believe they are, but let's say that they are right, that this was a Christian nation at the founding of our government. Where the hell was this verse when this government was created? I mean, if that's true, then maybe one day America can abolish this concept of having a presidency, because we've all seen how risky that is, and we can move to a more sensible system of democracy, like a parliament. But that's a pipe dream, I know. I digress. To the point, we are going to see the Israelites move away from this priesthood-oriented theocracy, and now they're going to declare David as their monarch. And we're going to see that that is definitely not a good thing. David is often depicted as a wonderful human being. David is a nightmare. He is a scoundrel, and you're going to see that. Now, some other details to know as we prepare to transition to these works, and today we're not taking a deep dive into it, I'm kind of giving you an overview of what we're going to be talking about with these works of the prophets. The books of the former prophets focus on the Yahwist prophets like Elijah and Elijah, which, by the way, I cannot wait to get to these stories. These stories are so much fun, and it actually depicts one of my favorite narratives in the Old Testament. I'll just give you a breakdown of it because it's so much fun. Elijah, like me, is bald. You can't tell because I wear a hat. And according to the myth in the Bible, one day Elijah is traveling in this gaggle of just turdy kids. They start following him, and they start making fun of him, and they start making fun of him because he is bald. And Elijah prays, and two menstruating bears, yes, in Hebrew, it actually makes the distinction that the bears were menstruating for some weird reason. These PMSing bears, they come out of the woods and they maul the kids to death. So the moral of the story is, don't mess with bears, don't mess with bald people. And as a bald person, this story, I'm low-key just going to expose my own depravity here. It makes me happy. But more details to know about the books of the prophets are as follows. Like, these works of the Deuteronomist, try saying that 3 times fast. Deuteronomist have a negative view of both the Canaanites and the cultural practices within the northern kingdom of Israel. And this disdain for northern kingdoms makes it clear to scholars that the documents were likely written by the southern kingdom of Israel. Remember that the Israelites divided themselves into 2 kingdoms, the north and the south. And these works clearly poo-poo all over the northern kingdom. But the north remembers. Game of Thrones. Just kidding. Ultimately, these next works will contradict former declarations and commandments that could have been extracted from Northern Kingdom values. They're gonna make declarations and commandments that are contradictory to those that are found in the Torah. And we have seen this many times with the different sources that make up the Hebrew Bible. We've seen this many times with the sources that make up the New Testament too. And this is also why that when your atheist and when your agnostic friends say that the Bible contradicts itself and they make that criticism, in truth, they aren't wrong, all right? The sects of the Israelites were very much so at odds with one another, so naturally their sacred writings would disagree as well. So the Bible is full of disagreements, it's full of contradictions, some of which detail a morally superior observation to previous texts, and some that are just downright petty. And this is nothing unique in societies or with people who are in positions of power. And that's a good stopping point for us today, because we're talking about petty arguments in positions of power, and that seems to be culturally relevant for us today. This week, Trump announced that he is stupidly taking hydroxychloroquine, a drug that may or may not have any effect at all on the coronavirus or any effect at preventing one from contracting the coronavirus. And both branches of government right now and their dedicated media outlets are sharing their views of certainty that this drug is either dangerous or extremely effective, depending on what source you watch. And that's just silly, because this drug is in a treatment trial right now, and there's conflicting evidence to support both views, which is why Trump should not be taking it. It's usually used to treat lupus, and now people that have lupus are having a difficult time getting the medication because people are getting prescribed hydroxychloroquine for preventative medication. But here's the reality: this medication can harm your heart. Now, I'm not overwhelmingly concerned about whether or not it's dangerous or for Trump, right? Like, if he wants to harm himself, then that's his business. But I am concerned because it's dangerous for people that follow his foolishness and that are considering taking this drug as a preventative themselves. Now, let me be abundantly clear right now. It is still in clinical trials. It may work, it may not. But until we find out whether or not it's effective, this drug should not be taken to treat COVID-19 or to prevent COVID-19. So church, don't do it. And here's the thing. Trump lies so much anyway, he may not even be taking this drug at all. And I'm not sure if it's more dangerous that Trump is taking hydroxychloroquine or that he could be lying about taking hydroxychloroquine. Because overall, there's some pretty severe possible side effects with this medication that do not need to be risked for him, but especially for people of America, right? Side effects like damaging overall brain health, impairing cognition, impairing your thought process, and causing uncontrollable, dangerous fits of illogical rage, which to me could possibly indicate that Trump has been taking this drug since he was in kindergarten. But hey, thank God we're on the left, right? Thank God we're not harming innocent people with our rhetoric like Trump. Insert sarcasm here. Nancy Pelosi decided to Trojan horse body shaming by initially saying that she was criticizing Trump's morbid obesity because she's concerned for Trump's heart health. First off, let's not fat shame Trump's heart, all right? Because it's at least 3 sizes too small. He is literally the Grinch that stole Christians, all right? But Pelosi went on to make a very eloquent statement to project a very mean thing. She said Trump should not take the medication because he is morbidly obese, they say. All right, when you tag "they say" on it like that, it's clear that you're trying to slam the dude. Trump should not be taking this medication because, well, his overall health indicates that he is a fatty 2x4, and medical professionals say that he couldn't even fit through the bathroom door. All right, firstly, as a fat person, this was not okay. Trump is not even morbidly obese, by the way. A lot of people are saying that's a medical term. I mean, it's an ancient medical term that's no longer applicable, but he doesn't even fit that definition himself. My belly is actually bigger than Trump's. I have a good angle right now that kind of slims me down a little bit, but my belly is bigger and I actually weigh more than Trump. And I'm still not morbidly obese. I am medically obese, not morbid. Neither is Trump. Trump is about 70 pounds shy of being morbidly obese, according to CDC guidelines. Now, secondly, and this is very important, a lot of people don't know this, the body mass index, the BMI, is actually a product of eugenics. It does not reflect anyone's overall health. There are heavy vegans out there with internal organs and tissue so outstanding that under a microscope, scientists have seen that their red blood cells don't have holes in the middle, because upon a closer observation, their red blood cells are just tiny sliced beets. I'm kidding, but seriously, there are incredibly healthy people that are on the bigger side that are more healthy than skinny folks in this country. Like, BMI does not reflect health at all. As a matter of fact, doctors at my wife's job, a lot of them refuse to use it. Now, secondly, no matter what Trump's weight is, okay, even if Trump was morbidly obese, it's never okay to bring up someone's weight as a public insult. And when asked why Nancy Pelosi commented on Trump's weight, she said that she wanted to give Trump a taste of his own medicine. Now, here's the thing. Trump is a toxic, garbage narcissist, right? You can't hurt narcissists with insults like that. They're bullies themselves. But you can hurt many bigger folks in your circle of influence, because body shaming anyone perpetuates bullying, abuse, and worse, self-harm for everyone. Body shaming anyone harms everyone that fits that criteria. And secondly, just because Trump hurts innocent people does not mean that it's okay for us to stoop to that level. You know who else used to deflect their immature behavior by pointing out other people's past mistakes to excuse their own actions? My children. You know who learn growing up that their mistakes mean that they have to give an apology, and that apologies are always necessary and excuses are never acceptable? My children. All right? And the cognitive dissonance on the left, this primary, is just mind-boggling. Like, neoliberal centrists say things like, through the entire primary, like, progressives and Bernie bros are so toxic and they're so childish. And then 2 months later, Nancy Pelosi basically gets on the screen and says, I don't think Trump should take this medication because when he sits around the White House, he literally sits around the White House. Like, seriously? I thought when they go low, we go high. But apparently our new motto on the left is that when they go low, we give them a wedgie and we make fun of their dad for being a minimum wage janitor. You're poor. I mean, it's basically the same kind of childish excuse, right? So we picked on Trump and we picked on Nancy Pelosi. So let's talk about us collectively on the left here, because I saw a lot of lefty folks that were participating in body shaming this week after the story. Here's the thing, if Nancy's intent was to offend Trump, I couldn't care less about Trump's feelings, but I do care deeply about my friends and family that are overweight themselves, some of which weigh more than Trump on a scale, and how they felt when they saw their leaders and their friends and their family laugh and mock Trump for his weight was just so heartbreaking. Because no matter how much you tell us as big people that you love us, love handles and all, it does not change the fact that when you made it abundantly clear that Trump's waistline and his measurements disgusted you, that we had a sense that we disgust you too. So insult Trump. Call him an ethically bankrupt winged fart snorkel, right? Because that's applicable. But leave Trump's looks out of it. There are lots of people that look like Trump or share some of Trump's traits, but they also equally hate Trump's character. So when they go low, by all means, I'm all for going feral. Insult who Trump and who people like Trump choose to be, but not what they are unable to change about their appearance. Because you won't hurt Trump with that kind of language, but you may deeply offend someone that you claim to care about. Or worse, you give Trump ammunition to discredit all of your past valid criticisms of his moral depravity. Now, the Christian right, I got something to say to you too, because I saw this and I thought it was hysterical. Look, just because this act of body shaming is wrong doesn't mean that you on the Christian right get to demand an apology, right? Look, Republicans, Trump literally shamed a differently abled reporter on national television. Trump is a moral dumpster fire. Trump, as bad as this act was that Pelosi committed, Trump is far worse. You do not get to demand an apology when kids are in cages, when racism is celebrated, when Nazis worship the dude, and when people are mocked and bullied due to your president's constant, horrific rhetoric. You have no moral grounds to act indignant this week. But I will say, Nancy does owe every other overweight person that stands against Trump, and those who don't, she owes them an apology. Because even though Trump has zero room to demand an apology, when innocent people are harmed, the left does not get to ignore the need for one. And leaders on both sides of the aisle this day and age, they just need to grow up. There is no hashtag Obamagate likely, but I do think there is hashtag Babygate. And it might be something that our bipartisan leaders want to consider moving forward. Babygates, because they're acting like children. And America deserves more maturity from both sides of the aisle, especially during a national crisis. Like, what the hell are we doing? Can I tell you something, church? Can I just be openly transparent with you? This political season has just drained me emotionally. It has drained me. I am spiritually exhausted and conflicted because I see ministers on the left, progressive ministers, participating in body shaming and not standing with Reed like they did for Dr. Ford. It has left me in a state of depression until this week. This week, I asked for advice from Dr. Bernie, and I asked our own Dr. Bernie, right? Not Bernie Sanders, the doctor. And I asked Dr. Bernie, how do you handle this kind of disappointment? Because Bernie has been active in the political sphere a lot longer than I have. And Bernie said this to me, and it was really odd advice, but oddly it was effective, right? Bernie said, humanity has always been depraved and humanity's crumbling just how I predicted it would. And that strangely gave me a sense of comfort, and it made sense. Now stick with me, right? From the beginning of the scriptures all the way to the end, we see that people are self-destructive, and this is nothing new throughout history. So why are we surprised when we are acting destructive again? Look, the book of Judges, which we're going to go through here in the next few weeks, we will be looking at how humanity constantly is just falling into the same stupidity over and over again. They are struggling with the same corruption over and over again. So why are we surprised? So personally, this knowledge, it helped me out. But professionally, I was still having a ministerial crisis. I was still having a career crisis because it seemed to me like we were vocal when we saw corruption on the right, but we're being silent when we see it on the left. And I arrogantly thought, that I could make a massive change in the Christian left. I thought I could. I mean, in my youth, I tried to get evangelicals to adopt more progressive initiatives, like, hey, maybe gay people aren't awful. And they wouldn't even go that far, right? So I left them and I found the Christian left. And now on the Christian left, I'm experiencing the same, not the same type of rhetoric, because theirs is far worse, but I'm experiencing the same sort of resistance to call out what is wrong, regardless of whether or not the offender is in our own political camp. And though many in my network, and I will give them credit, some are moderates and some are progressives, and they're awesome. And they're doing just that. They are calling things out, and they share most of my perspectives. There are many more that are refusing to do so, that are both moderate and progressive. And in this pit of depression, man, I had this conversation with a fellow minister that I look up to, and I explained how I had doubts about my ability to make any sort of lasting change in the world or on the Christian left, or make any kind of impact at all, really. And you know what she said? She said, well, personally, I've given up on trying to change the world. I've given up on expecting to win, but I will take as much injustice and those who sow it down with me as humanity may or may not continue to destroy itself. Y'all, wow. Powerful, powerful statement. And maybe that's the point, right? Individually, we should always do what is right. Don't hear what I'm not saying. We shouldn't just give up.
It's not like nothing matters. It absolutely matters. But regardless of our ability to make a lasting impact, we should seek to do so, even if it means we may not win. So we get to die either failing entirely or perhaps victorious, but either way, we can finish our race with the knowledge that we fought a battle for a cause that was worth sacrificing our lives for. We get to die knowing that we made our stand while everyone else sat in complicity. So in closing, if you've been coming to this church for a while, I guarantee that you're going to enjoy this journey through the books of the prophets, because biblical prophecy is all about speaking inconvenient truth to those that are in seats of power, and that's what our church is known for. Sometimes it's what we're hated for, and this week I decided, you know what, that's okay. But also, church, I think I have missed out on something significant, a significant role for the church during this age that we all live in. You see, I've been looking at the church like it should only be on the front lines of protest, and we should only be calling out injustice, and we should only be making public stands on the right side of history. That's the work of the church. And don't get me wrong, we should do those things. And at this point, y'all are probably like, yeah, Christopher, we know. But you see, that's not all. Because without a reference, most people cannot catch the vision for the world that our church is trying desperately to describe and demand. And that's true for most things, right? If you've ever been in any position of leadership or tried to be an agent for change to any degree, let me ask you this. How often do people grasp your vision when you describe it initially? Not many, right? But if you can show them a model or a graph or give them a demonstration, it instantly opens their eyes. I mean, they instantaneously become more receptive because they can see it. They can grasp it just a little bit better. They can wrap their minds around the concepts that you're trying to present to them. There's now this blueprint that they can observe that they didn't have with words alone. Look, hire an architect and refuse to allow them to use schematics and see how well that goes, right? The point is that though we individually must speak truth to power, the church is the blueprint. Christian community, historically, was built around the gospel narrative, and it was meant to showcase the ethical, the environmental, and economical standards that we demand to see replicated from our political leadership. So when we condemn Democratic and Republican officials by saying no, we can simultaneously point to our community and say, look. Regardless of whether or not this macro society that we create can actually save this world, I think we should be foolish enough to believe that we can do just that, and I think we should act accordingly. But even if we fail, at least we can change the lives of those within our own community, as this world may or may not fall apart, because that's within our realm of possibilities. That's within our reach. We can actually implement a society like that. And that is no small thing, church. In truth, it might be the only thing. No matter the outcome, creating sanctuary for all peoples of all identities is absolutely worth creating. Absolutely worth creating, even if we don't win. There's a modern parable about two people walking along the beach. And one person sees starfish that are just scattered all over the sand. And this person is wise enough to know that these starfish, if they don't get back in the ocean, they're going to die. But there's hundreds of thousands of them, and there's only two people. And one person gets to work immediately, and one by one he takes the starfish up and he starts throwing them back into the sea, knowing that there's mere minutes before all of them perish. And the other person that's observing this says, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, there's no way possible that you can save all of these starfish. And the other person, as they are picking up starfish and throwing them into the ocean, they are saying, yeah, but I can save that one. And I just saved this one. and I'm gonna save this one, and I'm gonna save that one, and I can save this one. We may not be able to do everything, but we can do something, no matter the outcome. The world might end, governments might fail, Christendom may fade from all memory, but we will not allow these things to happen with our passivity, nor will we look for permission to build a loving world ourselves just because the corporate powers that preside over us are refusing to have the courage and the moral fortitude to do so themselves. And until next week, may the peace of the Lord Christ go with you wherever it may send you. May it guide you through the wasteland. May it protect you through the storm. May it bring you home rejoicing at the wonders that it shows you. And may it bring you home once again into our doors. And by the way, our physical doors are not going to open until everyone is safe, because protecting the vulnerable is the church, not a worship service. And until then, the church will remain open because it never closed. But until then, our worship services are going to be put on hold. Grace and peace. I love y'all.
Morning, friends. Christopher asked me if I would share communion with you all this morning, and at first I said yes, and then I said I can't do it, and then I decided I could do it. I know this time is kind of crazy, and a lot of us are feeling really overwhelmed. I know as a healthcare provider, I am certainly overwhelmed a lot of the time, but I have found that giving thanks is one thing that is really helpful when I feel anxious or overwhelmed. So I wanted to read this prayer from the Common Prayer, a liturgy for ordinary radicals. And it says, Creator of all, in your wisdom you have bound us together so that we must depend on others for the food we eat, the resources we use, the gifts of your creation that bring life, health, and joy. Holy be the hands that sew our clothes so that we do not have to go naked. Sacred be the hands that build our homes so that we do not have to be cold. Blessed be the hands that work the land so that we do not have to go hungry. Holy be the feet of all who labor so that we might have rest. Sacred be the feet of all who run swiftly to stand with the oppressed. Blessed be the feet of all whose bodies are too broken or weary to stand. Holy be the sound of children laughing to take away our sorrow. Sacred be the sound of water falling to take away our thirst. Blessed be the sound of your people singing to heal our troubled hearts. And so as we take communion this morning, just having this opportunity to be thankful for one another and all the people who provide things for us in this world, even in times of uncertainty. And a reminder, I think it's from a book by Jen Hatmaker, where she says that Jesus doesn't just invite us to the table to partake in his broken body and blood, but he invites us to break our own bodies and pour them out for one another. So we'll take communion together in that spirit. You want to take communion with me? Daddy and brother, you want to come? You take a cracker? You dip it in here.
Is it water?
It's juice.
Juice?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of juice?
Your brother wants to try it?
I think so.
Well, you can take the whole cup.
Yeah, the whole thing.
Blessings and peace, friends.